Hey, just finished recording this episode with Zack from Elevate. It was a pretty good episode. We get into quite a bit about creative direction, brand voice, rebranding. They recently went through a rebrand over at Elevate, so there was a lot of things we were able to talk about on the creative side of things and the management side of things because he manages a team. Obviously, there are some more things that we get into, but we can't give it all away in the intro. But if you listen to this podcast and you're not subscribed yet, please be sure to do that. Otherwise, here's the episode. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to episode number 33 of the After Hours podcast. Here with me today, I have the Chief Creative Officer of Elevate, Zachary Azzara. Thanks for coming on, dude.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. This will be a good episode. I haven't got to really talk to a designer in quite a few episodes. So, I always, it's kind of always been a passion point for me. I've always been interested in design personally. So, I think we'll get a lot of good conversation here. So this should be great. I guess, why don't you start off a little bit about, your history in esports, what you've done, what you currently do, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically started in 2010 and just came home one day after school and I was, getting bored, everything like that, and decided to trying to jump into Photoshop and just see what was going on with it because I had a few friends that were kind of interested in design and everything as well. And I started designing little avatars and stuff for people, obviously, 2-3 layer kind of design stuff because it was just, very broad. But overall, I kind of, with the interest in gaming and everything and kind of building that interest in design, I saw a lot of, opportunity from kind of just from a social media perspective, how you can build yourself. And I started reaching out to, anyone I could. A lot of people, it's funny enough, will go through those standard design searches of looking for GFX or anything like that. And I would always find like just random quick commissions for $2-3. And, this is 2010. So to me, that was $100 to me at the time. But no, it kind of developed into this thing where I just started building out my portfolio as much as possible. And then I would kind of reach out to some of the lesser, known esports teams or even some of the sniping teams at the time and just see what they needed done. And I ended up working eventually 4 years later with G Fuel and started doing photography based stuff with that. And, the passion from design kind of pushed me towards photography as well. And it kind of just built this niche for me where I was able to at least kind of find my own, I guess, direction with it. And, going through that, it was a lot of the times I found like even my friend group at the time, I'd receive a bunch of just nasty messages of like, you'll never make it. You'll never be anything with this. And it got to the point where I was like, you know what? It's not even to prove for myself at that point. It was just to prove those people wrong.
Yeah.
So I started, continue with esports and everything and ended up working with teams like Denial Esports. I worked with Optic Intel back in the day, Esports Nation, just a bunch of various people that, really kind of built me out to who I was today. And it eventually led me to, being able to work with Elevate and everything and kind of revitalize the whole, marketing side and creative side of what it is.
Cool. Now, I know you mentioned that I think the way you worded it was that graphic design came after you were like involved with the gaming community, right? To some extent, or you knew of the gaming community?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was one of those things where I was constantly watching YouTube as a young kid. It was, such a huge thing to me. So I saw kind of, some of those YouTubers that had, different designs and stuff that I thought I could maybe expand on. And to my thought, at least, it wasn't that great what I was putting out. But it was to the point where I was at least trying to get my name out there with them.
Right. Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. That's the best way to do it. Now, I guess, what was your first experience, or when did you first stumble onto the esports / gaming space? And like, what kind of drew kind of reeled you into it as a whole?
It was definitely, especially working with G Fuel, they kind of, because, prior to that, I wasn't really with any teams or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I was always interested in the competitive side of things. So working with G Fuel, they were obviously sponsoring all these, some of these larger teams, some of these smaller teams. And it really opened me up to see like, there's a serious market here. It's just in its infancy now, but when I saw that, I saw the business aspect of it, and seeing that I could build upon that myself, but also try and find a team to work with that to help build upon that as well was just phenomenal to me.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Now, you meant cut into this a little bit before, but so you're working with Elevate now. What does your day to day look like there as the chief creative officer? What do you do on a day to day basis?
So day to day, a lot of it is basically taking in requests from all of our staff members, or finding out different events and stuff like that we need to prepare for. The current creative team, as it sits now, we have 4 designers with us. One that's actually not announced at this moment, and we're it's a very small team of at least my side of things for the creative and everything. But it's working with them to help delegate projects, and also on weekends and stuff like that, we'll jump in Discord and kind of just I will study with them and work alongside them, because I mean, truthfully, working alongside someone compared to just trying to lead them the whole time isn't really going to get you anywhere. You need to know who these people are. So building off of that, we'll try out different concepts and everything to help, bring the brand together even more.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, I know you said it's a smaller team, so it's not like you're managing 100 people. But like, what is something that this is great because we could talk both creative and management side of things. What is what do you think the best way is to like keep them on track, or to keep everybody on the same page without like 2 or 3 people working on the same thing? Like, for example, one graphic needs to get done and 3 people accidentally end up doing it at the same time. Like, how do you set that precedent and avoid any miscommunication?
Yeah, absolutely. Our chief operations officer, Kyle, he actually implemented Trello just recently into that, and that's a multitasking board kind of thing.
Yeah.
And every week we'll do our Monday C-level meetings, and then Tuesday we'll do our staff meetings, and we kind of rekindle with everyone, figure out what the plan is for the week of everything that we need, and work through that as a team and knock out different tasks.
Cool. That's great. Um, So, we'll probably come back a little bit more to Elevate as the time goes on. I know you mentioned photography too. I knew you did photography, but I totally blanked on that this leading up to this today and the conversation and all that. Do you also do photography for Elevate? I guess 2-part question. Are you still doing photography for G Fuel?
So I don't. Most of my photography now is just kind of just me going out with camera and just taking photos. It's not as big as I was into it, or at least I used to be. But a lot of like even IRL job wise, like it's a lot of that when it comes to creating briefs and everything. I'm doing most of the photography for that end of it. So more of our product shots and everything like that, just to for a better marketing perspective on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you also head up marketing with Elevate, or is that not under your kind of bucket?
So it kind of clashes with it.
Okay.
I was initially our chief marketing officer, and then we recently discovered I think it would be best, and especially I definitely prefer this of me being more brand focused and rather than working with social media stuff like that. However, I do still assist with everything involved under marketing.
So when you say more brand focused, are you focusing? Like obviously you guys just came through a rebrand. Obviously I only saw the public side of it, so I would imagine with any rebrand there's a lot of behind the scenes work. How much involvement did you have with that? And if it was a lot, I'd like to kind of walk through your thought process throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. So luckily, I was actually part of that for I'd say about 95% of it. We did, of course, bring in Creative Grenade to help push us across the line, and same with Mike Goldfield. He had some initial concepts back around I think it was May or June. But overall, I mean, this was something that was in the works for a year, just over a year. And we would sit there every single weekend and just come up with random concepts, ones that are completely out there and ones that are basically close to home, that were kind of more of a simple, like as if you look at Fnatic, right? That simple kind of change, but it was definitely an updated kind of look to it. We just jumped back and forth on those, and eventually it got to the point where we were kind of narrowing down what we wanted, and we hit within like kind of the mark that we wanted for it, while still keeping its roots tied into the old branding. And once we brought in Creative Grenade, like I said, they pushed us over the line with it. And funny enough, we didn't finish our actual brand like guidelines, everything like that, until December 28th, and then ended up launching on January 1st.
Wow. I mean, sounds like a long process, obviously in the works. Now, what was the driving factor behind that rebrand? Why did you want to do it? or was it just for a refresher? Was it kind of to push a general feel, an overall brand image, or like, what did that look like?
So it was one of those things where we knew that it needed at least an updated feel to it. I mean, if no one ever knew this, but we if you look at the old logo, it was actually partially an oval. And that one little
Ooh.
thing got to me one day, and that's when we sat down that year prior and just looked into it. We're like, look, we need to make some changes to it. But it was, with the market changing the way it is, you look at a lot of these different organizations that have everyone's starting to develop a similar style. However, it's a new kind of modern, fresh look to everything that, from an investment standpoint or sponsorship standpoint, they want a brand that, on its own can represent itself rather than having to explain to someone, yes, this is just esports. With Elevate branding now, that's where, we're moving more into apparel side stuff, because it's one of those things where, God forbid, Elevate dropped one day tomorrow, it still has that apparel side of things where it can still be represented as another type of brand in a way.
Yeah. Now with apparel and merchandise and all that, do you have hands on with the design of that? Do you guys kind of work with, I'm not sure who you guys are currently working with, but your provider to do all that? What does that kind of system look like? Are you guys going eventually to like some type of limited drop type thing, that type of system? I guess talking apparel is definitely very natural to me, so I would like to get into this a little bit too.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where we kind of had the team sit down and just go through. I'd come up with a bunch of different designs that some were absolutely horrific and some were like kind of fitting the market as it is now. We just narrowed through those, and a lot of the time is more of, I'll just come up with a lot of this, and I'll have most of my designers and everything look into it and try and tweak it, with things they see that may need to be fixed. But since we work with EGL, a lot of times they make it, very simple, and just we send off whatever we kind of need to them, and they're able to execute on it pretty well, to the point where, no questions asked, no problem. But we're moving a lot towards the drop side of things, because we notice, especially with, organizations like 100 Thieves, they're absolutely killing it with that, and that's something we want to kind of capture as well. And it seems that a lot of the esports market is moving towards that as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's obviously I think there's an ideal solution for each brand involved, or each brand in general. Whether you're big brand, small brand, somewhere in the middle, there is a perfect solution around both your evergreen products and your kind of limited drop products, whether that's, splitting it up 60-40, whatever the percentage split is. Like, there's always a way to incorporate both and still maintain your brand image. And I think there aren't enough teams in the space that are doing that. And I'm hoping, looking at what 100 Thieves is doing and similar brands in the space, people will start to realize that there is that opportunity there, and they don't need to just go one route, whether that's just POD or just limited, or just inventoried evergreen products, or whatever the case is. Hopefully teams will start to take advantage of that opportunity and do a lot more with merchandise than what we're kind of used to the past couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny to look back too, where it was just the standard, every team would kind of just put their logo on the merchandise. All right, send it out, and now you see a lot of people focusing on the smallest things, just to, make sure that their product is the product that you want. I see a lot of different, apparel companies and everything, and you guys as well, that are just absolutely killing it, because you're focusing on, things like material and everything that just have changed over the years, but it gives it that, actual high quality, high dollar item to it. And you're able to just, the profit margins, especially from an esports organization, are able to double, triple, depending on the piece itself.
Yeah, definitely. The way, you mentioned it, like, or maybe you didn't, maybe I thought you did, but at any rate, the cost and the quality and the change in esports apparel as a whole has changed quite a bit over the past probably 5 years. Big things that have been changed are the fabric and the material, like you mentioned. So I, obviously, and that, for what we see, at least, that big of a jump in that short of a time frame, I'm only more excited to see what's going to happen in the next 5 years with like different types of products that get hot in the space, whether it's a change of material and fabric, or it's just like a new cut in style comes into the space and people get super hot on it, or it's an entirely different product, or whatever the case may be. You know, as the esports industry grows, it's going to be super, super interesting to see what changes from both a interest standpoint and like an overall quality standpoint, and, you know, who's involved, who's in the space, things like that. But, you know, I mean, I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that a lot.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So outside of Elevate, I know you do some, you said your IRL job outside of that is also in the design work. What does that kind of consist of on a day-to-day basis for you?
So with that, it's a lot of to break it down easily, it's more of just random requests coming in and having to knock them out in a, you know, a quick kind of time frame. I work currently in the vape industry.
Okay.
I know that that's a very topical kind of you know, industry to work in because it's just everything going on with it. But a lot of our stuff is everything from, you know, brand design to product design, you know, marketing on billboards, just anything you think of. And a lot of my current work, at least, is just coming up with different brands, you know, briefing it to our C-level team and hoping to get that approval on each brand that comes through. But it definitely is a hectic industry to work in because the amount of changes and regulations that come through from the FDA and everything. But it's a great eye opener to really see, especially from an industrial standpoint, how things actually work within, you know, when it comes to industrial based design and everything.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know what it is about. I don't know if this falls under industrial design too, but like branding and packaging and like product, like display design. I've always found some really strange interest in, like, you know, past apparel and all that, like the way things are boxed up and all that. And I'm sure that kind of falls under what you would do as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know what it is. I've always had this crazy weird interest in it. And like the way you could look at a package or a box that your product is in, and how the product is displayed totally affects how somebody will receive the product, both, you know, physically and mentally. You know, you look at the way Apple brands or boxes up their product. I recently got the Apple Card, and I've never had an experience opening up and turning on, activating a card like that in my entire life. It's like, it was very painless, very seamless. Obviously, there's two parts to that. There's the design and the actual functionality of it that's different. But like, I've always been a huge fan of Apple, or like Razer is. I'm a big fan of the way they package product. And for whatever reason, I've always just had a lot of interest in that. I don't know, you know, if you have a similar mindset on the way things are packaged, if you take a lot of interest in that or not. But I don't know. I'm like, it's a little weird.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Like it's funny because I initially, when I joined the company and everything, I didn't start with packaging design. It
Oh
was
yeah.
I was doing standard social media based graphics, newsletter stuff, and they actually let go of the packaging designer that we had, and they came into my office one day like, "Hey, do you mind doing this?" And I was like, "You know what? I'll give it a shot. I've never done it before."
Yeah.
And I can tell you right now, I don't think I will ever leave packaging design. It is it is such a phenomenal way to just open yourself up to like new perspectives to look at the way something is made. I mean, it I'll go into random grocery stores and stuff and find, you know, products that I'm like, well, it could have been fixed this way or done this way kind of thing. And I'll sit there every single day trying to find just a different way that, you know, we could package our stuff that'll help the actual brand or the product itself stand out because it's such a cutthroat market right now where a lot of people are just trying to get their products out there on the shelves. But if you create that one, you know, that one kind of product with a packaging or a little box, you know, anything like that that helps it stand out, you will immediately jump to the top of it.
Yeah. I think it's funny how you mentioned that you would go in a store and look at how things can be done differently or packaged differently. Um, I would assume it's similar for you, but for me, prior to getting involved with apparel in any capacity, I didn't care the way things looked or how the way things felt or anything like that. I just bought it because it had a logo on it. It felt nice. I like the design, whatever it is. But now every time I walk into any store with clothing, like I scrutinize everything. It's like, oh, where was this made? You know, what is it? The fabric makeup of this, you know, is it sublimated? Is it screen printed? Is it this? Is it that? And I just run through that entire process with every product. Why is it priced this way? And like, it's opened my mind to a completely different look at each individual, at something that I would have otherwise never done. So I don't know if you have that deep of a mindset with it. But I think it's interesting that, you know, prior or before and after being involved with it, you know, you have an entirely different mindset on it. And I think it's, I don't know, interesting. I said that a lot, but that's the right word, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. It got to the point too where it's like, doing this every single day, I would, and especially like in those instances going into a grocery store or anything like that, like when I go to look at the package, it almost ruins it for me because
Yeah.
it's like, because they did it, this certain way, I feel like, okay, well, I'm not getting my best bang for my buck kind of thing buying this when, competitor B over here has nice packaging. And although their product may not be that great, you buy with your eyes. That's
Oh
the
yeah.
first thing when it comes to it. So if Apple's presenting me a phone and Samsung's presenting me a phone, I'm gonna lean towards Apple because just the way they initiated their selling points with their phones, it's not even about the phone at the end of the day. It's just about their presentation of it. They take such a distinct product that now at least we live day to day on. But if you look at when they first came out and everything, they're looked at as they're crazy.
Hmm.
But they were able to present it in a way that no one was able to hit yet, and it broke it down so simple that, quite frankly, it almost makes it seem like your consumer is Homer Simpson. They broke it down in such an easy way that Homer Simpson could understand it, and that's what I think. Hopefully, a lot of different industries and different companies and everything are moving towards, because the overcomplication of products nowadays is just getting to the point where a lot of people will avoid it as much as possible. And the more simple things are, and the more fast paced, this different kind of selling techniques and everything go, it's a lot easier to just purchase something that's a quick, easy setup, like the Apple Card that you mentioned and everything.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, like as it's kind of hard to put yourself in that mindset too, because I guess we have had instances where we've wanted to do something new and cool and better than X, Y, and Z, whoever else is doing it, and we put all this thought into it, and there's this great system in place, and we're like, oh, it's going to work perfectly. There's this funnel, you follow through the funnel, blah 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 blah, and then nobody does it because it's too confusing for them, and then we do something that takes 15-20 minutes to put together, and the idea is ready, and it's just like, we'll kind of see what happens. Whatever happens, and it's being that it's just very transactional, it's very straightforward, it's just A B, there's not all these other steps, it just does infinitely better. So the Homer Simpson analogy is great. I think that's everybody should strive for Homer Simpson to be their buyer that way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's great. I think that's great. Cool. So I guess to segue back a little bit into Elevate. Now, are you in charge? Do you also run like the content, or is there somebody else that manages like the content of the brand?
So a lot of it varies definitely. We're
Yeah.
we're kind of all, I guess, truthfully hands on. We all just kind of do the same job, just a little bit more different roles here and there for people.
Gotcha.
But it's one of those things that we all just love in general. Like, content is trying to be our biggest focus right now. We do kind of just like those simple meme style videos that you see with Space Station does a really good job at.
Oh yeah.
We're trying to move more towards that because it's those quick kind of meme type videos is what people love nowadays. They eat that stuff up. So we're trying to move more towards that level and eventually move into full scale, like actual content production when it comes to a series like Vision or a podcast itself, or just anything you think of. That's kind of what our main focus for at least 2020 and on would be. And that ever since the rebrand and everything like that, it's kind of opened our eyes up. Like, this is who we are now, and this is the route that we need to take to have what it is to succeed at least, and also have fun with this.
So you mentioned this is who we are. What is the current brand voice or the message that Elevate is trying to portray?
That's a great question, because we've jumped back and forth on that before, and we kind of realized that it sounds cliche too, but it's from our perspective, it's always make sure that we're, from a public eye, doing the best that we can, and helping as much as we could. And we keep coming back to the fact that, especially the fans that we've had since before I was even around, a lot of those people right now are our main focus. We're trying to make sure that this is the brand that they fell in love with 5-6 years ago. This is what we want, and we want to build that core fan base into not just an esports kind of scene for it, but as an overall global brand. I know it sounds crazy, but I think that's kind of the goal that anyone should lead to, is you want your brand to go global. And this truthfully become like my child at this point. It's a constant upkeep of it, but it's turned into something that I want us to obviously succeed with, but also on a personal level, just live Elevate.
Now, how big? I know you said you have like 4 designers. I don't know if that's plus or minus you, but there's like 4 or 5 creative people. How big is the overall like staff of Elevate, like excluding players and content creators?
Overall staff, I think we are right around. It's in the 25 to 30 range.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. I'd have to get like an actual number, but we're right around that. And we've definitely seen a lot of growth recently. We were, I'd say, a year back, we were just around 15 to 20. But it's a lot of people that see that same kind of goals that we have that they're trying to lead.
Oh, oh,
Does that cut up?
oh, yeah, you cut out.
Oh, sorry.
You said, but I heard up to similar goals. You bring 25 to 30 people all with the same goals, and then after that it was black.
Yeah, so basically a year back, I'd say we had just around 15 to 20 people, and we're trying to expand with it a lot, and just bring in the same people that see the same kind of goals and vision that we have with this, and that want to see a brand that they can call their own succeed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that makes perfect sense. Now, I guess we probably don't need to get into the semantics of, I guess, every position, but for you as the chief creative, what are you looking for in bringing somebody on? Whether you're currently looking or not, what does that kind of vetting process look like for designers?
A lot of it is just basically the same kind of mindset with it. It's just making sure that they see the opportunity that we also see, and a lot of our biggest goal is kind of, well, most of the time we're always on Discord together, and just hanging out, playing video games, stuff like that. Like we want that core family kind of feel to it.
Oh,
And I'll
yeah.
be honest with you, in the 10 years of experience, not a single organization have I sat in even like an old Skype call or a TeamSpeak, stuff like that, where I've felt like what this kind of family feel is with Elevate. And it's hard to find that. It definitely is. But that's, we want a core group of people that are able to call themselves or call each other, their best friends and everything.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think that's what's interesting is I think that's an underlying similarity between a lot of successful companies, not even in esports, outside of esports, like people who, not necessarily like whether they're excited to go to work or not, like that's beside the point, but like to go, be excited to see the people that you work with. Like even for me, like obviously I come to the office every day and I love the guys that I work with. I love what I do. That's a different case. But like back when I worked at Target, I hated working for Target. My job was miserable. I didn't like what I did. I was decent at it, but I worked at 4 or 5 different stores throughout my tenure at Target. And there were some stores that I liked more than others because naturally I had the same position, but I meshed well, more or less with the different people that I was working with. So I think a huge contributing factor to what you enjoy or what makes you happy what makes you happy when you're working and successful and not want to absolutely just quit your job is the people around you. And I think that's super important. So it's great that you have that at Elevate. More people should be focused on company culture as opposed to the final dollar amount or the Twitch numbers or the Twitter likes or whatever the metric is. I think it's super, super important. Company culture should be priority number one.
Yeah, and you know what, you brought up a good point earlier too of the just you'll work everybody works a job where they don't like it, and it gets to the point where once you find that job that you truly enjoy, and I mean you truly enjoy, you wake up every morning with a smile on your face knowing that you're not going to work, you're going to have fun.
Oh yeah.
That's what makes you appreciate those, whether you worked in a restaurant or for instance like Target, stuff like that, where you work these, what you'd consider dead end jobs that you get to the point where you'll sit down one day and realize like this is what this all led up to. And I wouldn't change it for a second. I mean, looking back on some of the jobs I've worked in the past, like those experiences, good or bad, got me to the point where I am now and just happy with what I'm doing. And I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't change that in any way, shape or form. Like that's who I am,
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I totally get that. Now I guess to run it back here a little bit. We didn't really get into your graphic design when you started. Like we got into like how you grew it. Are you entirely self-taught?
Yeah. Funny enough. So I went to, I'd say like 95% self-taught.
Yeah.
I went to college for a year on it.
Okay.
And it was at the time I think I'd already been designing for just around 6 years. And I was being taught these basic concepts and everything with it that I was able to, I finished one of my courses within a week, and that was a 6 month course. And then two, I also actually ended up teaching one of my classes as well, because it was just, it got to the point where I realized I was paying to teach and also learn the same things over and over. And I couldn't do it anymore. So I told my parents, and they were obviously, they wanted me to, be happy with it and everything. And at the end of the day, that's what you need, right? Is just, although there was that worry that like I would disappoint them in a way, right? There was that confidence from them that they knew that I could do something with this, and I wouldn't trade that in for anything. But it got me to a point where I was able to continue working freelance. I was also working a restaurant job at the time, but working just nights on graphic design work and everything, and eventually got me to be able to jump more into the industry and actually build a name for myself.
Yeah, no, I think so. I don't, when was it? I want to say it was after I dropped out of like my community college. I did like online schooling for a couple months for graphic design. Also, this was before we all moved here and all that. But I think like I had a very similar situation. By no means was I as experienced as you were with graphic design when I was doing this. I was probably only 2 or 3 years in, but I knew my way around Photoshop. I knew my way around Illustrator. I kind of understood the tools and all that. And it's project number one is create a circle, color it in, like figure all this stuff out. And it's like this is great if you know nothing, but it's kind of hard to start midway through without being bored and paying for something that you don't need. And I guess the big issue around that is like everybody has this mental feeling, or I mean people I guess in your and I age range, and kind of I guess probably our age range, and right around there have grown up with this mentality that they have to graduate college to get a degree, or they have to get a degree to work in their field, especially in graphic design, because what kind of job are you going to get with no true graphic design degree? Because nobody's going to want to work with you, whether you're what's it called, your portfolio is good or not. And I think the past couple of years people have kind of strayed away from that a little bit and started to realize that just your work with a lot of graphic designers, work is just going to speak for itself. I think it's super important that you're like, yes, going to college is great. That piece of paper helps you out. It gets you in the door in some cases, but at the end of the day, people hire the person and the portfolio in some cases versus just having a piece of paper that says you graduated a particular college or whatever the case is. So, I mean, hopefully we'll continue to stride away from that, and there won't be this stigma that you have to go to college, you're never going to make it in life. But I'm glad you were able to make that decision, and you're doing well for yourself, and I'm glad there are people out there that are, but I don't think there's enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? Don't get me wrong. I full-heartedly agree that college is great for people that are just getting into it.
Yes.
Because especially the art school that I went to and everything, it definitely teaches technique. Don't get me wrong, and that's great. But at the end of the day, you can't teach creativity. You can teach technique.
Exactly.
And that's the hardest thing for people to understand is like I can show you around Photoshop all day long, but the issue is it's not you just following the same concepts that I make or what techniques I showed you with it. It's you expanding on those and making it your own. And a lot of people struggle with that. And you'll see, I've worked with some people outside of esports industry and everything. I've worked alongside designers that I've seen ones that have gone to college for even their bachelor's or just even their associates or anything. And not to sound like cocky or overconfident with it, but I'm looking at my work in comparison to theirs, and I can see like they have textbook stuff where they just follow through with what they were given, and that's it. But most people a lot of days now want someone that can take the concept that they give them and build upon that and build it into something that they never would have expected, but will also in the long run probably make them happier with it. And a lot of the times it's hard, especially like I'd say for me, it's hard for me to follow a brief to a T because it's not what I'm trained to do. And yeah. I guess that's a fault of being self-taught, but it's not something that I'm okay with doing because I don't want to sit there and make if someone tells me just make a LA, kind of monogram or something like that, I want to build upon that, make it yours. I don't want to just follow the basic construction that I was, shown. So a lot of people are finally, finding their way around design and kind of building styles that are their own and building a real name for themselves because of what they're shown. I mean, if you look at someone like Jesper Isha, there you go. His artwork, I I still to this day will say that he is the best in the industry. And although he's not specifically esports, just him being self-taught the way he was, the amount of technique that he puts into his actual paintings and everything that he does, it is insane. That kid is on another level, and he's younger than we are.
Is he?
And yeah, no, he's I think he's 17. I'm pretty sure.
No, he's not. That's insane.
It's crazy to see these younger artists coming up now compared to like when we all started, that are learning this stuff overnight compared to what would have taken us a year or two to learn at least. But it's just that adaptation with YouTube content and stuff like that. I mean, YouTube now offers courses where you can learn design on your own through them, and I find that phenomenal because you're not. It's basically like going, it's like going to a community college kind of thing, but getting the same degree that you see some of these industry professionals that are getting. And that's something that, if my kids ever came to me and said, I want to get into art or something like that, absolutely. At the end of the day, do what makes you happy. But I found that art definitely let me express who I was and kind of, branch out to other different, I guess, techniques and different ways that I could kind of show who I really was.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I know you mentioned Jesper Isha as a self-taught and like phenomenal. By no means taking anything away from him. He's a great designer. I see his work all the time. I think I follow him, but I do see his work all the time. I love his work. But it's funny you say like super super creative, and then like super someone who here recently I found it is much younger than me. But do you know who Owen Rowe is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he just recently put it out on Twitter how old he is. He's super young. He is probably one of the most fundamentally sound designers I know of in the space. If you've ever seen like a branding kit that he's put together, it's like super fundamentally sound. You would think he went to all these years of college and was taught like the perfect way to do it. And I'm 95% sure he's entirely self-taught. I mean, he's super young, like I think he's 16 or something, 17 maybe. But hands down, one of the most fundamentally sound designers I've ever come across in the industry. So it's super interesting how much further along somebody with no degree can be compared to somebody who has a degree, and like you said, is good at following the technique and understands the technique, but doesn't have the creative voice. And it's the whole thing is just very interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up Owen Rowe actually, because he, like you said, like fundamentally he hits every single mark when it comes to design, and he's one of those people that like I'll look at some of his work and just ball up my fist and get all angry because I didn't make that. Yeah. Like he just hits it perfect every single time, and him and just his friend group as well. Max Chan also. There's a few in there that are just astonishing for their age. Like I don't understand. It makes me sit here and feel like almost a boomer at that point. Like I feel like a grandfather to this industry because they're sitting here knocking this stuff out in a day, and I'm sitting here taking 3-4 days to figure out where they even started.
Yeah. How old are you again?
21.
20. I mean, you're still super young.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Grandfather. I agree, though. I mean, it's crazy how like there's a bunch of different. Yeah, obviously, in the industry as a whole, the major age group is probably 16. 16 of being on the super young end, probably up to mid 20s, is like the average age of the I guess the working people in the space. 16 is actually probably young, probably 18 to like mid 20s. But anyway, it's crazy how like that's such a big gap. What it feels like, but it also feels like some of us are a lot older in the space and we've been around, or they've been around forever, and then there's people who are older, and I don't know. The whole age thing in this industry is very misleading because nobody really knows how old each other are, and everything is just very all over the place, I guess. I don't know. I don't really know where I was going with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny to look at too, like, especially with the younger designers coming up and everything. A lot of them, are through this perception that, obviously you and I both, we, work through, I don't know how many years for, just doing volunteer work, stuff like that. But I think that builds a character in you that I know it's hard for a lot of people now, especially with the way that, you see COD is being funded, everything like that. Like, I know it's hard for a lot of people to be open to just doing work because they enjoy it. But at the same time too, like working with sniping teams back in the day and working with, Denial Esports or anyone prior to that, like it taught me a lot. And, there were times where I'm definitely sitting there like, okay, I feel like I do deserve money for this. Absolutely. But without those experiences, I don't think I would have, the skills I have today. And a lot of people, like I said, aren't really open to doing that anymore. But I'm telling you right now, like for every younger designer that's coming into the scene that I see just sit there and grind out Fortnite headers, stuff like that. I know it's repetitive, but that kind of like just experience will eventually branch into some of the best designs we'll probably ever see. And it just takes that, just sitting there working the grindstone constantly and just getting to the point where you're comfortable with, your style to it, that eventually it's going to build into these insane graphic design. You'll see people like Alpaca, for instance, or
Oh God.
Sesso,
Yeah.
anyone around there. Like I remember when Alpaca worked in Phase, and like he was just every single day putting out, different types of work and stuff like that. You look at him now working with 100 Thieves. I mean, he has insane work that I don't think I'll ever exceed to that level. And that's just what I want to like reiterate to people. Like, just keep at it. I know it's definitely hard over time sitting there and just constantly just grinding out this stuff, but I promise that it definitely pays off.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I like, you mentioned the people aren't really interested in doing the whole volunteer / work for free thing. Like a big thing to consider with this is, I think it's super important, especially if you're building your personal name in the industry, whether it's this industry or anywhere. It's super important to like get your name out there. And the best way to get your name out there, the easiest way, any business owner is going to be happy to let somebody work for them for quote unquote free. Understanding that, they may build a connection if they're building something client side, or, just the experience, or something to put into your portfolio or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing anything else, what the hell is the difference if you're getting paid or not to do it? Why wouldn't you just do it? Put together the portfolio piece, or work with the team that has the Fortnite team that you really enjoy watching, or work with the company that sells that cool product that you're super interested in. And then if you're working with them, you're building a relationship with the management team or the ownership team or whoever it is. And then one thing leads to another, and you're put on and you start talking to whoever's client that might be, and then you land a job that way, and you're building all these connections. You have this connection pool going up, you have your portfolios being added to, you're building experience, you're getting better at your own craft. There's no sense in if you're literally just going to go home and do nothing, whether that doing nothing is playing Fortnite and going nowhere with it, or watching Netflix, or scrolling through YouTube, or mindlessly on Twitter, or whatever it is. Like, you utilize that time so much better if you focus it on something that's just going to improve your personal skill anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, look, don't get me wrong. There's times where I come home from work and I'm like, I don't want to even look at a computer screen because I did it all day, and I understand that part of it, but you're right. Like, even if you have an hour a day, just set that time aside to jump into Photoshop or Illustrator or any kind of creative program, and just at least refine what you're working on. Even if you just did that same design yesterday, redo it one more time, because I guarantee that second time around, you're going to find new ways to do it that will make the last graphic that you did look like something you may have done 2-3 years ago. And it's just those consistent, repetitive kind of pieces of work that you keep going after that will eventually build you into, someone you never expected to be, graphic, or, when it comes to art wise and everything.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, even if it's like you're redoing something just to redo it because like you're bored or whatever, like you might redo it, look at it a different way, and you might totally find a new way to use a tool that makes you 50% more efficient on something you've been doing for a year and a half that takes you 20 minutes. It might take you 10 minutes this time. Like there's just, I don't know, like if people complain about not getting to the point that they want to be, but they don't put in the time, and I think it's there's a lot of I mean, I don't know, I always see a lot of complaining, so it kind of pops out and just comes up. But like I feel like people just don't put enough time into what they're doing, and have a certain expectation that they're just going to be where they want to be, and that they don't have to work for it. So I think taking the time to just harness your harness your craft, be better at what you're doing, is just gonna inevitably set you up in the long run. So I think that's what people should be focusing on.
Yeah, and I don't, at the end of the day too, I want people to understand that, like, it's okay to fail.
Oh yeah.
You may make something that you just absolutely hate, and that's fine. You can do that, because at the end of the day, you don't have to post it. You don't have to do anything with it. But it's completely okay to fail, because without those failures, you wouldn't, get to that next step or be able to, move on to something better or anything. There's been so many times where I've lost files and thrown a temper tantrum to myself, and it's like, you know what? I almost wish that I lose more files because of the fact that like I'll go on and make something, even better than that last iteration. And it applies to a lot of things too, that kind of failure aspect of you're gonna fail. It's guaranteed. Everybody does. But when you learn to understand that failure's okay, you'll eventually find this kind of, I guess, dynamic with yourself that you'll be able to go, okay, well, I failed at this. Maybe I try it a different way, or I move on to a whole new kind of project, or it doesn't matter what it is. You had mentioned music stuff prior when you and I were talking before, and a lot of the times I find myself like, and I guess with the artwork stuff, I'm comfortable enough to where I can just throw stuff out and be like, yeah, that's fine and everything. But with the music stuff, you're your own worst critic.
Oh yeah.
You'll sit there and you know banter with yourself about how terrible this may be and everything. And I have so much stuff that I've made music wise that just sits because I just don't feel comfortable putting it out for some reason. But I've had so many people tell me, just put it out. Even if it's not finished, just put it out, because eventually there'll be that one person that comes along and says, you know what, this is really good. And that one comment will eventually move you to the point where, okay, I'll put this next one out, and that those next two comments, and so on and so forth. And it just, once you build that confidence in yourself to appreciate what you've created, it's an undescribable feeling. You'll be able to do whatever you want when it comes to your different type of art. If you're doing photography, music, design, anything like that. Like, that confidence is what I feel everyone will eventually get to the point. And at the end of the day, it could also be a maturity thing. But I mean, I went on for years of just constantly just making stuff that literally sits in a folder called Reorganize on my desktop.
Yeah.
And it's just a bunch of different things that I will probably never, ever post, but I'll go back to every once in a while and see how I can build upon it from, 2 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, like, another thing to consider is I would say probably almost no major professionals in any scene, content creation, a streamer, an artist, a photographer, whatever it is. Nobody started at where they're at right now. So like you can't compare your beginning. This is definitely ripped from something because I feel like I recently heard it, but you can't compare your beginning to somebody's like the middle or like their end. Like, nobody's ever going to open up Photoshop and be as good as a Jesper Ish or, or Alpaca or whoever it is that they're looking up to. Your first product is never going to be as good as that. But if you look back far enough at these people that you're super interested in, and they've documented their entire career, you could see the growth over the time that they've had. And something that, you may or may not think is good, they posted it and they may or may not have thought that was good, but you see like, their tendencies and like, where they start to, hone in on what they're good at over time. And I think, I definitely agree with you that you shouldn't like overthink it. And, everybody is their own worst critic. So I, but at the same time, definitely don't hold back on something because you put all this work into it. Use it as a documentation tool. That way you could look back and you could be like, I did that. That sucked. But like, look at me now. And I find myself doing that, or I used to, because I don't design as much as I used to. But I used to find myself all the time scrolling back in my media tweets or whatever portfolio files that I have on my computer. And it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe I actually like tweeted that and thought that was good. And then, 10 years from now, if I was still designing, I would have the same mindset. So, I definitely would, if I was to advise anybody designing or doing anything creative, don't hold back on posting that stuff. Just put it out. If people don't like it, they don't like it. They don't need to follow you.
Absolutely. No. And it's funny too, because that whole, like, people, a lot of people make, especially design work, just specifically for likes and retweets. And that's, that's completely fine. But it's not going to be, if you're making something to see numbers on a social media platform, you're not going to love what you do. I see a lot of people that have dropped out of this industry because that's what they were focused on. And although that feedback is great, don't get me wrong, it's not the most important thing at the end of the day. It's doing what you enjoy, obviously, and that you're never going to find your real style or your own craft if you're trying to keep up with the trends of social media. Like, I truthfully think, I mean, obviously social media has definitely helped me when it came to like building a name and stuff like that, but I truthfully think social media was one of the worst things to happen, because it gets to the point where so many people are focused on numbers and stuff like that, where they'll delete some work that they made because they don't feel it fits the standard that everyone else did. And those people that don't normally fit the standard or kind of outside the box are the ones that end up being like a Steve Jobs or anyone you could think of that just made it to a level that no one will probably ever reach.
Yeah, no, I agree. like obviously the internet and social media as a whole has been great because it amplifies your reach. Back in the day, if you were a graphic designer, you would have had to go door to door or like building to building to find someone to work with you for your work. So that aspect of social media is great because you can get to as many people, as you want to reach out to. But I do agree with you. It has been very, it has caused people to, focus on likes. Like look at what Australia did. Australia and Instagram. I don't know what other platforms. I know Instagram amongst other countries. They don't see their likes anymore on their posts. If you create a new Instagram account now, you don't see likes on posts either. Obviously, older accounts are different. I think they're kind of still easing it into the U.S. But it's like clearly it's a problem that people overthink that, and it just becomes how many likes am I going to get, how many followers am I going to have, blah 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 blah. And I agree. It's one of the massive turn off isn't the right word. The negatives of the social media as a whole. But hopefully, as time goes on, humans could bounce back from this and focus less on getting likes and stuff like that, and focus more on just the use of it and the social aspect of social media. But I guess only time will tell.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny too because although Instagram put out that kind of notice of saying, look, we're removing likes, stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, you'll have those social media specific based companies that may suffer because they're reporting numbers, stuff like that of, this how many likes, retweets we got, or whatever, whatever platform it may be. That eventually over time, I think especially, I don't see YouTube ever doing it, but even if YouTube did it, it may be terrible at first. However, you'll see a lot more interaction in the comment section, everything like that. And you'll get actual genuine feedback or just someone saying they like the video you made or they like the photo that you took or whatever it is. You'll see a lot of more genuine kind of relationships built through different industries and everything, and those connections over a good amount of period will build your platform itself even more to what you may expect.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm on the interaction side, both there and like I think the content overall is going to be more genuine as opposed to it being like clickbait or like bait or whatever. Because if the goal isn't to get likes anymore and it's just to document your life, or whatever the case is, document your message or whatever, people are going to focus more on documenting that, their personal life, their message, whatever, as opposed to the likes. So the content will be more genuine. It'll be less, I guess, baity. Probably not the right word, but at any rate, I think the overall product on these platforms will be more genuine in the long term.
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, so I'm pretty sure I covered all my major topics that I wanted to get into with you. I think we got into quite a bit here, so that was great. Do you have any like lasting, or like last word or like anything we didn't get into or anything you wanted to make sure you mentioned before we wrapped up?
I mean, not really. I mean, I kind of mentioned it earlier, and it's more than just that statement of kind of a message of some of the designers coming up and everything. Just don't stop. Just keep building upon your craft. And I don't care what anyone says. Someone come along and say this is terrible. It doesn't matter what they say because if you enjoy it, that's all that matters. And that's I know it's cliche, but it's like that was the hardest thing for me, especially. And obviously, no one's going to learn from a mistake they don't make themselves. But that's something that I feel like fundamentally wise is the most important thing, is to be able to accept feedback. And if it's terrible, go back into whatever you were making and try it again. Even if it is, a simple, just random bot account that's just telling you this, like, even though you may have thought it was perfect at first, go back into it, try it again. And I guarantee that second time around, you're going to find an outcome you never expected.
You know what? I totally agree with that. There's nothing I could follow up to make that sound better. So I'm just going to leave that there because I 100% agree with that. Definitely take feedback the way you can. Something that I had the mindset on is like, you have to know how to take feedback and to differentiate between whether feedback is constructive or destructive. And if you could get past that, take all the feedback in and then immediately bucket it. If it's destructive and it doesn't help anything, you get rid of it. But if it's constructive, as much as it might hurt, that's something you could act on the next time. But definitely, don't ever let that steer you in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I guess the last portion of the podcast is always the shameless plug portion. So if anybody wanted to reach out and talk to you specifically, what is the best platform or platforms to do that on?
Easiest way I'd say is Twitter. I know a lot of people run off that. It's just Zachary Azzara.
Azzara. I pronounced it wrong and you didn't even correct me.
Well, I'm fine with both. It works.
Okay.
both ways. Yeah, I have no issue with both. I was called all through high school Azzara, so I'm used to it.
All right. Well, I will make sure in the pre-roll intro, fix that. Cool. But yeah, other than that, that is today's episode with Zach here. This was a great episode. So, if you made it this far, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, whatever it is. Other than that, I will catch you all in the next episode. Later.